Carol's journey. Carol loved the mountains. She was a strong and brave hiker. Every weekend she packed her bag and went on new adventures. She loved the fresh air, the tall trees, and the sound of birds singing. Hiking made her feel alive and free. One day, Carol and her best friend Lisa decided to climb a tall mountain. The sky was clear and the sun was shining. They smiled and laughed as they walked up the steep path. The mountain was beautiful, and they felt happy. As they climbed higher, the wind became stronger. Dark clouds appeared in the sky. Carol and Lisa looked at each other. They knew a storm was coming. They needed to be careful, but they didn't want to stop. They had come too far. Suddenly, the rain started. The rocks became slippery. Carol held Lisa's hand as they carefully moved forward, but then something terrible happened. Lisa slipped. Carol screamed and tried to grab her, but it was too late. Lisa fell down the mountain. Carol watched in horror. She could not believe what had happened. Her best friend was gone. Tears filled Carol's eyes. She felt cold and empty. The mountain, which once felt like home, now felt dangerous and dark. She sat on a rock, shaking. She had lost her best friend, and she did not know what to do next. Carol sat in the rain, frozen with shock. Her hands were shaking, and her heart was beating fast. She wanted to scream, but no words came out. She could not believe Lisa was gone. After a few minutes, Carol forced herself to stand. She had to find help. She climbed down the mountain carefully, her legs weak and unsteady. Every step felt heavy. Her mind was full of memories of Lisa, her smile, her laughter, her voice. When she reached the bottom, she saw a group of hikers. "Help! My friend fell!" she cried. The hikers rushed to her side. One of them called for rescue. Carol felt a small relief, but deep inside she knew Lisa was gone. The rescue team arrived quickly. They searched the area, but after a long time they found Lisa's body. Carol covered her face with her hands. It felt like a bad dream. She wished she could wake up and see Lisa again. Days passed, but Carol could not stop thinking about that moment. She blamed herself. If I had held her hand tighter, she would still be here, she thought. The mountains, which she once loved, now felt like her worst enemy. Carol stopped climbing. Could not touch the mountains anymore. Every time she saw them, she remembered Lisa's fall. The guilt was too heavy. She stayed home, staring at the walls, lost in her thoughts. Her friends tried to help. "It was not your fault," they told her. But Carol did not listen. She avoided people. She stopped smiling. Even simple things, like walking outside, felt impossible. One day, Carol's mother sat beside her. "Lisa loved the mountains. She would not want you to be afraid," she said gently. Carol did not reply. She wanted to believe it, but fear held her back. Weeks passed, and Carol knew she could not live like this forever. She decided to take a small step. She walked to a nearby hill. The wind touched her face, and she closed her eyes. It felt strange, but also familiar. She stood there for a long time. The mountains were waiting for her, but was she ready to return? She did not know yet. Carol visited the hills every morning. She walked slowly, feeling the ground beneath her feet. At first, she only stood and looked, but little by little, she climbed small paths again. The memories of Lisa were still there. Sometimes they made her stop. She felt the pain in her chest, but she kept going. She knew Lisa would want her to be strong. One day she met an old climber on the hill. He watched her and said, "Fear is natural, but it should not control you." His words stayed in her mind. She thought about them every night. Carol decided to try again. She packed her bag and put on her climbing shoes. Her hands trembled as she touched the first rock. But she took a deep breath and started climbing. Higher and higher she went. Her heart beat fast, but she did not stop. The wind felt fresh. The sky looked bright. For the first time in a long while, she felt alive. Carol continued climbing. Every step was difficult, but she did not stop. Her hands gripped the rocks tightly, and her breath was heavy. She remembered the last time she climbed with Lisa. The pain was still there, but now it was different. She reached a flat ledge and sat down. The wind touched her face, and she closed her eyes. She could almost hear Lisa's laughter. "You can do this," Carol whispered to herself. She felt stronger than before. The old climber appeared again. He sat next to her and smiled. "You have come far," he said. Carol nodded. "I was afraid," she admitted, "but now I feel ready." The old man pointed to the peak. "Fear never leaves us," he said, "but courage means climbing even when you are afraid." His words gave Carol strength. She stood up and took a deep breath. The peak was not far now. She looked at the path ahead. For the first time since Lisa's accident, she felt hope. She was ready to move forward. Carol continued her climb with steady steps. The mountain was steep and the wind was strong, but she did not look back. Every muscle in her body ached, but she welcomed the pain. It reminded her that she was alive, that she was still moving. As she climbed higher, the air became thinner. She paused for a moment to drink some water. Looking down, she saw the long path she had already climbed. It was hard to believe how far she had come. The sun was setting, painting the sky with orange and pink. The view was breathtaking. Carol felt a deep sense of peace. She touched her necklace, the one Lisa had given her. "I will finish this for you," she whispered. With renewed determination, she pushed forward. The top was close. The mountain had tested her strength, but she had not given up. She knew now that she never would. Carol took her final steps toward the peak. Her legs were tired and heart was beating fast, but she did not stop. The wind was cold, but she felt warm inside. She was almost there. When she reached the top, she stood still. The world stretched out before her, mountains, valleys, and the endless sky. It was beautiful. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she felt free. She took Lisa's necklace from around her neck and held it in her hand. "We did it, Lisa," she whispered. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but this time it was not from sadness. It was from peace. The old climber appeared again. He smiled at her and nodded. "You have found your strength," he said. Carol smiled back. "Yes, I have," she replied. She looked at the sky and felt the sun on her face. She knew Lisa would always be with her, not in pain, not in sorrow, but in every step she took forward. Carol turned and began her descent. She was no longer trapped by the past. She had climbed not just a mountain, but out of her own grief. The journey was not over, but she was ready for whatever came next. And this time, she was not afraid.